This is King's Rest plus 14, a very difficult key with the affixes. But before we get into that too much, I do want to talk about where this series, quote unquote, is going. When I started the series, I wanted to make this something that I talked about very specialized situations and 5-mans, and it kind of just started off way too general. So this is probably going to be the last kind of full video guide that we do. Before we talk any more about that, though, I just want to bring that pack up. It's actually a pretty dangerous pack, but DK has a lot of interaction with it. You could D&D slow it. You could also AoE grip it together. I would recommend targeting one mob, AoE gripping it together, putting D&D down, and then hopefully you have a Blood Elf. If you're Alliance, then you can have, priests can do it with Mass Dispel. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of people go and dispel them individually. Or you can just maybe run in with AMS up. I'm not exactly sure. I've never actually tried that, but I'd imagine if they all hit you and you have AMS up, you won't get feared. I'm not sure about that, though, so let me know if you guys know more. But anyway, for now, we're going to talk a little bit about what I want to do for the future and hopefully get your guys' opinions and thoughts on this. So originally the series was actually recommended by a good friend of mine, Chris. He recommended that I do kind of like post commentaries of interesting and problematic parts in dungeons, and it kind of just turned into this, like, I'm just going to do a full guide for every dungeon, quote unquote, a full guide, right, where we talk about specific parts of the dungeon that are interesting that week, but it's more like a full dungeon guide. And that's great, but now we're pretty much done. The only one I haven't done is Siege of Bralis, and I think I probably just won't do it. I really don't like Siege of Bralis. I don't dislike it as much as I like other dungeons, but the dungeon itself I don't feel like it's very engaging, and I don't know what I would make a video on in a lot of parts. So, but regardless, what I do want to do is do these specialized videos instead. Like, for example, kind of like we did in Legion, I make a video on something that I see people make mistakes on all the time and explain how I feel the best way to mitigate those mistakes would be. So that leads me to the other situation where it would be mostly from the perspective of pugging. And it's like, okay, so now this turns into something that I think could be very renewable. I'm going to make videos on things that people mess up all the time as pugs. I think that would be a very good idea. How do you guys feel about that? I would love to know your input, because the thing that I worry about the most is more so just this, by the way, is a very dangerous pack. CC if you can. Explosive orbs are not going to spawn from CC anymore. I want to bring that up. That was hot fixed. They also have about 50% of the health. That mob spawns there. That orb spawns there, that is. But it was line of sight of us, so it didn't hit us. Just be aware. But you really want to work on the explosives as a healer and tank. I think it's the most important thing you can do, because now, especially that you can pretty much one-shot them with any global, you don't want to be wasting damage dealers, globals. You don't want to be wasting their resources, maybe even their small CDs on these things. So just be aware that, explosive adds a lot of time to dungeons because people are using resources on killing those things. So just be aware of that. But anyway, so the thing that I want to talk about with that pugging idea is that, like, I don't know what I would call it. That's the thing. So I'd be interested in hearing your opinions if you have opinions on this topic. Like, for example, this is what I want to summarize. This video is going to discuss a highly specialized topic that people make a lot of mistakes on when you're pugging with, like low coordination groups, more so, not necessarily pugging, but low coordination groups in Mythic plus dungeons. Here's how I think best to mitigate this, especially as a Blood Death Knight tank. But, I would talk about like ways that other classes can do it and other roles as well. And I think this would be a really good series. And I think this would be even more effective than, because, let's be serious. If you want to watch, serious Mythic Plus, you probably whatever. This is a 14. It's pretty tough. But like, there's people who are probably doing 18s. You know what I mean? Now, unfortunately, they're not really making post commentaries. I don't know, like these top, quote unquote, top players, I guess they just don't really have time for it. But if they did what they could do, they would be very successful. Let's put it that way. But I guess, their Twitch is enough. So regardless, I don't know. I want to do that. I think I would be able to, bring a lot of insight into pugging, and that would be very useful for some of you guys. But I don't know. Let me know how you guys feel about that. Anyway, this is a boss that, when I was thinking of making this video originally, I wanted to start that. I wanted to just make that on the trash coming up. But then I'm thinking, like, no, this is a boss that people, if you've never really done this fight, if you're not 100% aware of it, you should be aware. This is a very dangerous fight on Tyrannical. It's fortified this week. It's still dangerous, but it dies very, very quick. As you see, that spit gold mechanic does a ton of damage. That big windy looking circle, that's nature damage. It's a knockback. You can prevent it with Death's Advance. I would recommend AMSing it too, though. As you're going to see, ton of nature damage. So be careful with that. But the goal here is to have a druid. All right. Long story short, fight is extremely easy if you have a druid, because they can AoE roots the mobs. You want to spawn them all in one spot. We didn't do a great job of that, but we do a good enough job that we can still root them and they're not moving. You just don't want them to move. There are ways to do it otherwise. You can kill them. They don't spawn explosive orbs anymore, luckily, so that's nice. That was hotfixed a couple weeks ago. You can kill them. They are going to obviously slow the pace of the fight down a lot, though. The other option is to kite them in the staggered pattern, especially with slows like a DK might have, a mage might have. You could even use Ring of Peace. You could use other knockbacks, like maybe from a priest. But yeah, realistically, that is very difficult because what you have to do is kind of stagger them. You want to kind of like have group one spawns in position A. It moves 20 yards forward by the time group B spawns. So you want to have B placed in the place where A would have gotten to. Do you understand? It's complicated. So I wouldn't recommend that. Let's put it that way. Now, I do want to talk about this trash a bit, though. That mob there, Channel Lightning. We also have this induced regeneration, something like that. It's a heal. It's like a hot. So that can be either purged, but obviously it can be interrupted. So you want to do that. That mob there is going to do that Channeled Lightning ability. You want to interrupt that with Death Grip. All right, plain and simple. Death Knight can interrupt every single time it casts. Any knockback will work. So Druid obviously can do it. Monk can do it with Ring of Peace. Demon Hunter can do it with Sigil of Chains, but not really that reliable, is it? So I'm not really sure what you would do if you're not a Demon Hunter tank or a Death Knight tank, that is. I guess you could line of sight it. That's what most people probably do, is just run away from it, line of sight it, etc. But as a Death Knight, you don't have to do that. You could also interrupt it, the other mob there. So you'd really want to do that. You're going to do a lot of work on that pack as a Death Knight, and I would really recommend it because, you know, you're basically removing the main mechanics on that pack. Now, this mechanic here, this Whirlwind, is pretty dangerous, but what's problematic, at least used to be, is that mind control there. You see the mob is mind controlled. That can be purged. Shaman, Priest, Demon Hunter can purge that. All right, Blood Elves can as well. You have to target them, though, if you're not a Blood Elf, obviously, so you have to make sure you target them and then purge them, and it'll go away. But I think they nerfed that recently to make it used to last like 30 seconds. Now it only lasts like 8 or something like that. If that's actually the case, then you don't really need to worry about it. It's going to go away eventually anyway. But otherwise, if you didn't have a purge, it used to be a real problem. This pack here is just a really large pack. Doesn't really have anything to do with teaming, I don't think. I think this is just a normal amount. Obviously, Infest does change things, though, because you're just wasting tons of AoE. There's no way, I don't think anyway, that you can actually see this stuff. So you're going to have to kill it. This is pretty much your only option here, is to just single target one down and deal with it that way. And explosive orbs are going to get all kinds of controlled, out of control, that is. That green poison, I think, is dangerous, too. I can't remember. That purple, I'm not actually sure how this trash works, to be honest. This is why I would like to delve deeper into some of the pieces of trash and figure out exactly what's happening with some of it. But I'm pretty sure that purple stuff is them that's them leaping. And I think if you get hit by it, you get really slow or something. I've had people say, like, oh my god, I'm very, 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 very slow. And I think that's probably it. Or maybe that's the next pack. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, this whole gauntlet area has given people fits, and I can see why. But frankly, I think it's very easy as a Blood DK. I've just, as you can tell, I just bone storm my way to victory. And Death Strike, you know, when you're hitting 5 targets with Hemostasis talent every time, you're going to do a lot of healing on this pack, as you can see by the HPS meter. So yeah, realistically, it's pretty nice as a Blood DK. And as other tanks, it's probably not pretty nice. So this mob here is another one. This pack here, it's got 2 raptors. You're going to see this raptor type later in the dungeon, but I think they do this purple mechanic, and I think that's what slows you. If you're standing in it, it slows you seriously, and it's hard to get out of otherwise, especially with those raptors. Yeah, there's that purple mechanic there. I'm not exactly sure. So let me know if you guys know more. But, you know, that's why I wanted to kind of pivot on this series, because, you know, we're coming up to the end. I've done 9 out of 10 dungeons now. The only one left is Siege of Bralis, and I really just not sure I would have any input on it. Like, again, if you want to see, like, if you want to know everything about a dungeon, I could help with that, but I don't feel like that's my specialty. You guys know I just don't feel very confident with, like, super general things. So even when we're going through this, like, this is like a 45-minute video, crunching it down into 30 minutes so it's more watchable, better watch time, you know, better metrics on YouTube. We're kind of just rushing through it, and there's things that I want to talk about which I can't really talk about as much as possible. So I think it would be more served if we find a reliable way to make like a pugging, a pugging mistakes type series out of this, and I think that would help a lot more. I think that kind of specialized discussion is what I'm way more suited for. Speaking of specialized discussion, this is something that a very specialized Death Knight can do. That purification beam can be difficult to dodge, and it's going to put a very damaging dot on you, but you could just AMS it and prevent it. What a joy. AMS is probably one of my favorite spells in the game. Also be aware, that mob is teeming. There's going to be another one coming up. It's very weird. It's almost like the positioning of that mob was like there was supposed to be another one to its right. But that's not the case. It's up here padding. Now, I want to pull small here, and I'm going to tell you why. You're going to see in a second. These mobs are going to spawn a lot of explosive orbs, and there's all these mechanics happening. But the Druid, he's a good player. We played a couple dungeons together. He's going to go ahead and decide, we don't want to pull small here. Let's go ahead and pull big, and that's it. Explosive's going to get completely out of control. There's no way we're going to salvage this. And the real problem here is that this mechanic is going to slow you. It's going to put this poison thing on you. It's a dot. I think it does damage too, but it slows you substantially. That's the big problem, because then you're going to get hit by more of it, and you're just going to die. Now, we do have Poison Dispel. I was thinking about this before. I'm not actually sure what healers and whatever combinations can actually dispel poison. I think everybody can do 2 as a healer, right? It's a magic dispel always, and then 1 other. Is that correct? So there's 2 for poison, 2 for diseases, 2 for curse. Is that correct? I'm not actually sure. So if you guys do know, let me know. But I think the answer is paladin and monk. I believe that's the case. And if that is the case, I don't know if it is though. I'm not sure. I really don't know. But regardless, maybe there's some that can do 3. I'm not really sure. But anyway, if you guys know, let me know. I'd like to make a list out of that. So maybe when you guys will do that in the comments, that'd be great. But anyway, you do want to be careful. The point I'm bringing up here is that if you don't have a way to dispel poison in that room, then you got to be really careful. Now, I'm pretty sure we do have a way to dispel poison. I guess Monk can do it. I don't think Druid can, and I'm not sure Priest can. So regardless, we can dispel it, I assume, and that's good. But it's still dangerous. And it's the reason it's dangerous this week especially is because of explosive. Explosive is going to spawn in the mechanic. And the way the mechanic works is if you get hit by that green swirl, I think you get a stack of it, does a lot of damage. Otherwise, when they die, they put a green puddle down, and that gives you a stack. And that is obviously dangerous. As you see, I got a stack there. It didn't move out in time. And then explosive orbs are going to spawn in it, and I'm going to dip in and get another stack, blah, blah, blah. So you want to deal with this. You don't want to be getting hit by this stuff. It can be dispelled. It can be probably removed maybe with freedom or something like that. I guess you can gimmick it with AMS as well if you really need to. But, the goal I'm looking to have here is just not to wipe in this room, because I've done it on lower keys, and we had a lot of trouble with this room. But otherwise, also be aware here that these mobs are not tethered. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. I think it's probably not intended, but they don't appear to be tethered. And what I mean by that is that you could literally just grip a single mob and the rest will not come, even though they're standing right next to each other. That can be very useful for an infested pack if there's one in there. So one thing I do want to bring up on this mob here is that for some reason, when I tank him here, this coffin is always the one, 100% of the time. I've never seen it not be him. I don't know why that's the case. I don't know if that's a bug either, or if that's intended, or maybe it has something to do with the way I'm positioning him. But just be aware, when I tank him there, it 100% of the time is the one next to him. So I could literally just spam it as the cast is finishing, get the guy out the second it spawns. And that is really nice, obviously. Big uptime, big mechanical overcoming a mechanic. Let's put it that way. So again, we're pulling 5 here, very dangerous. Now that the explosive orbs are so nerfed, again, they're dying very quickly. The Demon Hunter is doing a very good job of it. Realistically, like I said, I should be doing a better job of it, but it's like some melee just hit it so hard. I don't know. It's like, ideally, if I was able to just say, listen, I'm going to get every single one, and if you see me not getting one, then get it. That would be what I would do. But, I was using Blood Drinker earlier in the week because this was before they nerfed it. I was like, Blood Drinker is just mandatory this week, because if there's an orb that spawns in a bad location and your good orb killers can't get to it, then you have to make sure you get to it with Blood Drinker, and that makes it really easy. But yeah, we're done with Blood Drinker now. Back to Heartbreaker, just way too good on teaming weeks, and you're gonna see a teaming pack coming up here. But anyway, this boss is very dangerous. He doesn't do a lot, but when he does it, does a lot of damage. As you see, Druid gets hit for about like 60 to 70% of his health there. Really high damage just from one tick of that fire. You get hit by multiple ticks, you're dead for sure. This entomb mechanic is pretty easy to deal with. You see, the person just needs to spam the tomb, and they shake it, and you just click it, and you get them out. That Demon Hunter did a very good job of it, and that plus Lust is going to make this fight extremely quick. So all you want to do here is Lust and swerve a second entomb, because by the time a second one happens, the fire is going to have filled the room. As you see, we basically created a line of fire, which isn't optimal. I don't think you want to do this. You probably want to have people standing in a position where you can't isolate yourself from one side of the room, and definitely don't want to be opening your interface while you're doing that. As you see, I got hit by the fire, take a ton of damage, so did 2 others. But regardless, with Bloodlust, the fight is over now. If we got a second entomb, we would have to have either ran through that fire or ran all the way around, and that would have caused problems. You know what's going to cause problems? This pack. Take a look at this. Without doubt, the hardest teaming pack in the game, if you ask me. I cannot even believe this is the case. And the real problem with it is the Brute. The Brute is going to cause so many problems. Now, we do have good CC here, and I'm going to show you something pretty interesting with the mind control in the next attempt here. But the problem is this knock-up mechanic. You can't see it if you tank him here on the stairs. And I did this on purpose because I had already done this week, and I wanted people to just stand in it, but I guess that's too dangerous. It's just too dangerous. Really, I feel like if you stand in it and get knocked up, you die from the fall damage, not from the actual damage it does. And that's kind of foolish for non-tanks, I guess. So instead, they suggest an option where we kite them all the way back. But something very interesting is going to happen. Now, when I was talking about, pivoting the series, this is why. This trash pack, I could literally make a 30-minute video on, talk about everything that you would need to know on this trash pack. And I feel like that would be way more helpful than just doing an entire video on a dungeon that people realistically have probably done dozens, if not maybe close to hundreds of times by now. So we'll talk a little bit about one thing that I definitely want to bring up here, okay? This pack is extremely dangerous with teaming, and the real problem is the Brute. The Brute is extremely difficult to manipulate, and his mechanic is very wide and expansive. So what we're going to do is we're going to CC basically ideally 4 out of the 5, okay? We have 3 CCs. We got Root. Root will still spawn explosive, so we are going to have to line of sight. We have Shadow Priest, he could shackle, and then we have Monk who could paralyze. Demon Hunter cannot imprison undead, which I think is ridiculous, but it's the case. So we're going to mind control the other mob, waiting for the Root. Mind control the other mob, but watch what happens. I forget, even though I manipulated this when I was soloing at Taldazar a couple weeks ago, I forget that the mind control mob is going to get threat. I'm going to try to pull it back. Long story short, we're going to try to pull the Brute back to the other room. But I forget, watch, he's going to switch to the target. There you go. He's going to try to attack the mind-controlled target. And I'm actually thinking this is a good thing. Because I'm like, oh, the mind-controlled target just died. But no, somebody pulled threat. It was the Demon Hunter. He pulls threat off the mind-controlled mob. So I still have it, and I don't realize that. And it ends up causing a lot of problems here. But anyway, I'm thinking, whatever. Maybe we could just line of sight it here. Easier to dodge this way, but probably best to just bring it in this room. But at this point, we just wasted so much time trying to just get him in this room. The mind control, or not the mind control, but I do break the mind control to try to switch mind controls, and it doesn't work. So I fail on that front. That's not good. There's a big mistake, just tons of mistakes. Like I said, could make an entire probably 20 to 30 minute video just on this pack alone. But try to give you the quick version here. The Brute is insane, and honestly, you gotta CC. I cannot imagine how you would do this pack without CC. Literally, I don't know if it would be possible. If you walked in with the same group and were like, nah, dude, we're face tanking this. I don't think it's possible. I really don't. There's the bleed mechanic. There's all these hexes, the casters. There's this totem that's gonna heal people. There's obviously the infest. You're gonna have to deal with the infest. There's the knockup mechanic. It's just impossible. It really, really is. So the one thing I was going to suggest, if I was to go down a deep dive on this pack, would be to have the mind control mitigate the pack. I would recommend doing what I kind of did by accident there on purpose. Mind control, have it die. Just run it in, have it die. Now, just be aware, when you do that, if you don't damage a mob and it dies, you don't get count, okay? This can be manipulated, and especially in the past, you used to have this happen all the time in challenge modes and stuff, where you could have mobs die. You could actually mind control mobs off ledges and they would die because of it. The stuff like that happened all the time in challenge modes. But they wouldn't give you count, so you need to be aware of that. It can happen in Molar Load still as well. Apparently, the bombs that spawn, they can give count if you kill them yourself. But if they explode, they won't, whatever. I guess maybe if you damage them and then they explode, they'll still give count. But regardless, just be aware of that. So that's what I would have recommended if I could have done a deep dive on that pack. I would have, I would mind control it, have everybody stay back, mind control it, run one mob in, have it die. you know, whatever. If I die, reset. However, the best option would be ideally maybe be Night Elf, and you could Shadow Meld. You don't have to worry about it. Or you can just go from there. You know, if you only have 1 or 2 CCs, CC the other, Mind Control, Suicide 1, and then Mind Control another. Well, you've just reduced the pack by 3 mobs, and one of them's dead. You know what I mean? But you don't need the count from it. You got plenty of count. The count is way over in this dungeon. There's no way to avoid that other than, I don't know, maybe invis pots or something. I've never really successfully skipped anything in here, and I'd like to hear your opinions on that if you have one. But I don't know. I'd never really skip anything in here. Now, you want to mind control the mob by mind control. That Beastmaster mob does a lot. But unfortunately, since I'm so scared about the trash upcoming, I do want to kill it so I could make sure I keep mind controlling and reducing the pack's danger every time. And that's what I'm going to do here. So yeah, that's important. But realize that, oh no, that's really pro right there. Holy shit. That Shadow Priest, I'm telling you, I should have brought this up earlier, but this is a Shadow Priest. And really, if you see a Shadow Priest like in 1300 rating area doing 15s and shit, he's probably really good at Shadow, right? Like, think about that. If you're playing Shadow after basically four straight expansions of them being very, very bad in 5-mans, you really got to like the spec. And if you really like the spec, you're probably really good at it, you know? So it's like, I don't know, Shadow gets a bad rap, but it's like if you're an accomplished Shadow Priest, it's almost guaranteed that you're a successful player. But you got to be worried because he might have gotten it as this priest. He might be trying to try Shadow, something like that. But anyway. Yeah, I did mind control the Beastmaster, that is. It's going to do a lot of damage. It would definitely be the thing that you would mind control under certain circumstances because it's going to give you a ton of DPS. There's also got a knockback on it. You want to try to turn that off, if you ask me. It's going to lose some DPS, but it can knock back mobs, especially the Zool mob later on, and that's not a good thing. You don't want him to be knocked back down the hallway. I guess what you can do is you could actually have... You can do some shenanigans where you could like grip Zool into the corner and then have it knocked back constantly into the wall. Position the mob in that way. That might work, but I don't know. It's just a mess. I wouldn't recommend it. Just turn it off so it doesn't knock your mobs all over the place and prevent them from being damaged. But again, we don't mind control it now because I do want to make sure I mind control the correct mobs and minimize the damage of the pack. And we could still CC. We're going to CC the infested mob, and then I'm going to mind control another mob. So we're only fighting, what's that, 4 here? I guess it's normally 6. I don't know if there's an extra mob in this pack with teaming. I think it might be the case. But yeah, either way, it's just, this is a large pack anyway. So, even under normal circumstances, I might consider doing what I'm doing. Otherwise, interrupt the hex. The totems, I don't know if those mobs are even in this pack, but there's a lot of mechanics. Let's put it that way. This hunting leap, it can be moved from, it can be gripped, it can be knocked back, stunned, I think works too. Just got to not take damage from it. And then, obviously, there's that healing tide totem. So you want to kill that, switch to that. You can't AoE it. It's just like an explosive orb. You have to do single target damage to it. You cannot blood boil on it. It will not put dots on it, etc. Actually, I guess it's this mob here, the mob that's infested. That's the one that's spawning it. But so watch, look at that. Very interesting situation here. I'm going to explain that real quick. So the infested mobs came out. I did this on purpose, by the way. Infested mobs came out. I saw that they were going to a new target. And I was like, oh, I'll release my mob. They already picked their target, so we can just kill it all together. But that's not how it works. Even though the mobs were already the infested mobs were going to a target, they changed targets after I released my mob. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Watch, here we go again. I get baited trying to attack an explosive orb, staying in the mechanic because I just can't get out of it. I thought I would hit my head, but I was not where I thought I would, so I wouldn't take fall damage. Luckily, Shadow Priest saved my life. Probably does save my life, although I do die here anyway. Probably does save my life because if I took that fall damage there, I might have died and we might have wiped, even though, take a battle res. Same thing happened earlier, though, too. I was expecting to get knocked up, hit my head. That was something that I was trying to game on the earlier pack, too, with these brutes. I feel like if you get knocked up and hit your head, you won't take much damage at all because fall damage is a big part of the damage that you take from that mechanic. But still, you do take a lot of damage even without fall damage equated in there. So, okay, so this dungeon has some peculiar bosses, and this is definitely one of them. A lot of people lust here. I don't really like lusting here because I feel like you might waste it. It's such a long fight anyway. You're only lusting for one of the 3 mobs, and I don't feel like that's very valuable. But this mob is probably a good option to lust for, especially when it's first, because of this axe mechanic. And a lot of people, recommend dealing with it in different ways. I'm not exactly sure how I like dealing with it. I'm trying this kind of tank him in the center strategy. In the past, I've tanked it on the edge and just moved. So move out of this, like a 30-yard radius for these axes. Just keep moving around the edge, and then you have the middle pretty much free all the time. It didn't really work out very well, but I did try to keep it in the middle here. Apparently, if you do it, then the middle is free. The axes kind of aggregate towards the end, but I don't know. I'm not really sure what the best option here is, but all I know is it's a pesky mechanic. And you're going to see more pesky mechanics as we fight this mob, this part of this boss. He is going to summon totems, which is going to complicate the fight with explosive quite heavily. They can spawn explosives, and they will also obviously be spawning on the boss. So typically, everybody will be off dealing with explosives. Maybe even the tank runs away. Mob is casting lightning bolt. He's aloof to it. And there will be an explosive, as you see by the boss. So somebody needs to be there. Also, he'll be casting the Poison Nova. If nobody's near the boss, nobody's in range to interrupt, that Poison Nova goes off. You're done now, Skitty Pop. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. You're gonna die from that. But I think, again, if Monk can actually get rid of poison, which I do think they can with the revival, you can get rid of all of it. Maybe you save a wipe. I'm pretty sure it's a dot. So, I don't know. Just got to think about that. But you do want to kill the totems. They do have a lot of HP. I'm pretty sure there's one that it's like an explosive totem. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. This Thundering Crash totem apparently is an interrupt. It does an interrupt. So you just want to try to kill them all. But as you see, they're spawning explosives. The boss is spawning explosives. Luckily, now that they're nerfed, I can kill them extremely easily without any real input from a damage dealer. But if I was not doing that as a tank, if I was being lazy or lackadaisical on that front, then we'd have a lot of problems. Now, here's an interesting mob type. This mob type, this boss itself, I mean, more so, this barrel through mechanic, whatever, you can prevent it with the knockback, and that's nice. But this debilitating, whatever, this backhand ability, this is very interesting. It's going to put a massive, she actually gives me this this barrier, or whatever, this chi thing. I don't really need that. I don't even know what it's called on his life cocoon. Anyway, you don't need that. What you can do, though, is you can dodge or parry this backhand ability, okay? And by dodge, I don't mean move out of. This is something they have brought up on the live stream. You can't move out of it, but you can dodge it like the stat in World of Warcraft. If you don't get hit by it, you don't take the armor reduction. So that can be very interesting as a blood DK because you can parry it with Dancing Rune Weapon. Use Dancing Rune Weapon during it. Very high chance to avoid the mechanic. You also, you could prevent the knockback part of it with Death's Advance, but you're still going to have the actual damage taken element of it. So I wouldn't recommend that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to think about that kind of stuff. There's ways to mitigate different parts of the mechanic, but do you want to do that? I don't really know. The other option is to just run as far away as possible. It still knocks you back, even though you're really far away from it, and then you'll have a much easier chance to kite it and not get hit. But anyway, here we go. The final mob in the dungeon that is probably one of the hardest single mobs in any 5-man. It's basically a mini boss, and it does a ton of magic damage. Luckily, it's Blood DK. We're pretty well equipped to deal with magic. Obviously, AMS is going to absorb only one. It's not strong enough to absorb more than one, that's for sure. It's 100% shadow damage, though. So Death Strike, you got to really work well with Death Strike. As you see, I'm not doing a great job with it. But, the various amounts of healing we have is nice. And really, Death Grip is something that you need to be using. Use all your Death Grips. Gorfiend's Grasp as well. You're not going to need to use that again in this dungeon. Use it here. Interrupt as many of these Shadow Barrages as possible. And, yeah, just make sure you mitigate as much damage as possible with AMS, and then otherwise get ready to Death Strike. And one of these mob spawns, I'm not exactly sure how this works. For some reason, the Druid roots it for no reason. I'm not actually sure why, but anyway, that's pretty much it. Final boss, I really like Lusting here. I think this boss is very dangerous as a Blood DK. I think it's probably the hardest fight in here as a Blood DK tank, and it's because the mechanic he does that does like a lot of damage, it works really well if you're a tank that has great active mitigation, like a usable active mitigation. Demon Hunter, Druid, Monk, they have great active mitigation for this type of mechanic. And Death Knight can too with Death Strike timing, but it's a lot harder to use Death Strike when you want to on this fight than you might think, because these Raptors are doing damage. You're getting hit by this Tornado because you're bad at the game like I am. That's doing damage. So it's difficult to save and pile up hemostasis for that mechanic to actually heal up to full after it happens. But that would be the goal. You're taking a lot of damage from it. Pile up, multiple hemostasis procs and save Death Strikes. Maybe 2 Death Strikes back to back, you might heal yourself to full. That would be how other tanks would deal with it. They would use their active mitigation well before it. Unfortunately, we have to use it after it, and we have to be very selective on how we use it. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, kill the Raptors. That fear that they do, that second Raptor, it's going to be a real pain in the ass. You don't want to get feared more than a couple times there. Dodge these Cyclones. And then there's this spear mechanic. It's going to stun you. You can prevent the stun with Icebound, of course, but there's also a strategy element that you can interact with. I think like right where he just jumped to, yeah. Basically, it's always going to spawn there. So it's just kind of like in this area. It's always going to spawn here. You just run through it. That's the first combo. And then the second set of it is going to be like half the room is filled with spears and the other half isn't. And it's going to be kind of like this weird pattern. And you just want to be in between the pattern. And again, I think standing right here is where you want to be. You'll never get hit by either combo. But you do have to run, like, you know, you have to properly run out of it. So there it happens. This is clear. And now we have to run away from it. And there, as you see it, we avoid it 100%. So, and then it's going to happen again, the first combo. So anyway, that's it. This actually run went really, really well. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the pugging idea, what you would like to see. I got the shitty trinket. But anyway, let me know what you think about the dungeon, what you think about the fortified trash, what you think about the teeming trash. But otherwise, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.